Are you ready to learn the shocking truth about Britain's most famous and majestic building? Its opulent facades, familiar to everyone from textbooks and movies, conceal a reality you'll never read about in tourist brochures or official histories. Behind the famous golden gates and sparkling windows, a harsh, grueling life unfolded, devoid of even the slightest hint of a fairy tale. The Victorian era dictated its own cruel, sometimes sadistic rules for all the inhabitants of this vast stone labyrinth. While the monarchs watched the parades, hundreds of invisible people, day in and day out, without days off or holidays, gave all their strength and health to maintain this glittering illusion of grandeur. But what terrifying secrets did the endless dark corridors, where the royal family never ventured, hide? Be sure to watch this video all the way to the end. You'll discover the true and terrifying price of everyday comfort in the most prestigious home of the 19th century. The filmmakers will not only show you the underside of royal life, but also reveal shocking details about a secret rule for servants. A rule that, if broken, could get a person instantly thrown out onto the street without a penny to their name or any means of survival. You've definitely never seen a monarchy like this before.
Failure to comply will result in
What if I told you that everything you believed when looking at royal interiors is a lie? Behind every warm hall lay the colossal, hidden labor of dozens of unseen stokers. 19th century Buckingham Palace required an incredible amount of coal to heat its vast spaces. This black stone was the sole source of heat in an endless succession of cold rooms. Delivering the fuel became an extremely complex logistical challenge, hidden from the eyes of distinguished guests. Every day, tons of fuel were quietly moved through the intricate labyrinths of the cellars. The coal cellars were a dark and gloomy realm, hidden deep underground. From the crack of dawn, workers began filling heavy metal buckets with gleaming black chunks. These buckets then had to be carried up to the upper floors without the use of convenient elevators. The physical strain on the people performing this work was simply colossal and exhausting. They climbed hundreds of steps every day, trying not to make a single unnecessary sound. Silence was the primary condition of their presence near the royal chambers.
quick, wipe it off.
The very architecture of the building complicated the process of delivering fuel to the numerous fireplaces. The stokers used a network of narrow, dimly lit service corridors and steep spiral staircases. The width of these passageways barely allowed two people carrying heavy loads to pass each other. The lack of daylight made every movement cautious and slow. Every step held a danger for the weary worker carrying a full bucket. Nevertheless, the fireplaces in the staterooms had to burn constantly and without interruption. The royal family and their guests never saw these people, worn out by hard labor. For high society, the warmth in the halls seemed to appear as if by magic, all on its own. This artificial division of worlds was the foundation of Victorian court etiquette and order. The presence of a dirty laborer in the grand hallway was considered an absolutely unacceptable incident. Therefore, the system of secret passages functioned like a flawless clockwork mechanism. The invisible laborers ensured comfort while remaining completely unnoticed shadows. During periods of severe cold, coal consumption increased several-fold. This meant that the workload on the staff became practically unbearable. They had to work beyond their regular hours to prevent the temperature in the halls from dropping. The stokers' rest periods were brief and took place in the same basement rooms where they worked. Their living conditions stood in stark contrast to the splendor of the building's upper floors. They slept on simple wooden benches covered with coarse woolen blankets. Studying these hidden processes allows us to view history in a completely different light. We begin to understand the true cost of every moment of palace comfort. Luxury demanded constant service that tolerated not the slightest delay or failure. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this hidden side of palace life. What do you think about this invisible labor? Share your thoughts in the comments. And be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on new, exciting historical investigations. I'm going to reveal the best-kept secret about the comfort of high-ranking figures in the 19th century. Despite the huge number of fireplaces, Buckingham Palace remained an incredibly cold and uncomfortable place. The massive single-pane windows couldn't keep the heat inside the spacious halls. Drafts swept through the long corridors, causing the candle flames to flicker and go out constantly. The high ceilings nullified all the stokers' efforts, as the heated air immediately rose upward. Even in the monarch's private chambers, the temperature often remained far from a comfortable level. In winter, spending time in the staterooms turned into a real test of endurance. Ladies in open-back ball gowns were frankly freezing during long official receptions. To warm themselves up even a little, guests tried to stay as close as possible to the burning fireplaces. However, the heat from the fire spread only a few meters around the fireplace itself. In the far corners of the enormous rooms, the temperature could be close to that outside. The building's architectural grandeur stood in direct contrast to the practical needs of its inhabitants. Thick velvet curtains and heavy tapestries were used to protect against drafts. They were hung not only on the windows, but also in front of the doorways in the staterooms. These fabrics served as a sort of barrier, blocking the icy air currents from the corridors. Servants carefully closed all the curtains at nightfall to preserve the last remnants of the day's warmth. Window frames were often sealed with paper or cloth in an attempt to eliminate the numerous cracks, but these measures had only a temporary and very slight effect.
I should get some rest.
Waking up in the morning was accompanied by a sudden plunge into the cold reality of the vast bedroom. Overnight, the fires in the fireplaces had died down, and the room quickly cooled to freezing temperatures. The servants had to enter silently before their masters awoke and rekindle the fires. However, it took a considerable amount of time for the air in the room to become even slightly warm again. The process of getting dressed took place under Spartan conditions, far from the modern comforts we are accustomed to. The warm, layered clothing of the Victorian era was an absolutely necessary measure of protection against the constant cold. Bathrooms of that time were also not particularly comfortable or warm. Bathing often took place right in the bedroom in front of a lit fireplace. Metal bathtubs lost heat quickly, so water had to be constantly added. Servants ran through the cold corridors carrying jugs of hot water, trying not to spill the contents. The lack of central heating turned a routine hygiene routine into a complex logistical challenge. After bathing, one had to get dressed immediately to avoid freezing in the cooling room. The cold had a negative impact on the preservation of the palace's furniture, paintings, and musical instruments. Fluctuations in humidity and temperature caused valuable woods to warp and gilding to peel away. Paintings were covered with a fine network of cracks, and expensive wallpaper peeled away from the frozen walls. The history of this magnificent building teaches us to appreciate the simplest modern conveniences. What is available to everyone today with the flick of a switch was then an utterly unattainable dream. Do you agree that living permanently in such Spartan conditions required incredible fortitude? Do you think a modern person could endure such a harsh climate in those stone halls for long? Watch the video until the next chapter, and you'll learn why the endless secret corridors hidden from prying eyes were built. The secret that people pay thousands to uncover lies in the layout of this gigantic building. Buckingham Palace was designed to completely conceal the lives of the servants from the eyes of the nobility. Within the walls of the building lies a parallel world consisting of narrow corridors and secret staircases. This hidden network of passageways runs through every floor, like the circulatory system of a massive stone organism. The servants move through the palace, remaining completely invisible to high-ranking guests and their employers. This architecture maintained the illusion of magic, where food and warmth appeared as if by themselves. The main rule for any employee was never to be seen by the royal family. If a servant accidentally encountered a master in the corridor, he had to disappear immediately. For this purpose, special hidden doors, disguised as panels, were built into the walls of the staterooms. The servant had to turn toward the wall and become invisible, blending into the room's interior. Any eye contact with high-ranking individuals was strictly forbidden by unspoken palace etiquette. This required the staff to be incredibly attentive and to have a perfect knowledge of the hidden layout of the enormous building. The palace's vast size meant that the servants had to cover marathon distances every day. The distance from the kitchen to the grand dining hall was measured in hundreds of meters of convoluted underground passages. Every serving of a dish turned into a highly complex logistical operation involving numerous participants along the route.
Yes, almost done with the vegetables.
To save time, the servants devised optimal routes through the labyrinth of secret passages. They knew every creaking floorboard and every low lintel along their familiar path. This knowledge was passed on to newcomers as the most valuable information for working successfully in the building. In some parts of the palace, special hand-operated lifts were installed for dishes and linens. These mechanisms greatly facilitated the vertical transport of goods between distant floors. However, operating these lifts required considerable physical strength and extreme coordination of movements. The heavy cables often snapped, and the cabins themselves would get stuck in the narrow stone shafts between floors. As a result, many workers preferred to rely on their own 2 feet, carrying items up the stairs by hand. This ensured that fragile items remained intact and that the strict work schedule was strictly adhered to. Such an organization of space now seems cruel and unfair to us. However, for Victorian society, this was the natural order of things, which no one questioned. Servants took pride in their ability to be inconspicuous and perform their work with perfect precision. They considered it an honor to serve in the country's main residence. Despite all the hardships of daily life, this dedication to their work made the existence of such a complex and grand mechanism possible. The palace lived its own life thanks to thousands of steps taken on dark, invisible staircases. Today, many of these secret passages are closed to visitors or have been converted for modern use, but their old walls still hold the memory of the people who devoted their lives to invisible labor. They remain silent witnesses to an era when comfort was bought at the price of completely losing oneself in one's work. Like this video if you enjoy these kinds of fascinating historical facts about famous buildings. Please give it a like. It really helps us find and produce even more unique content. Are you ready for the shocking truth about how the day began for ordinary palace workers? A junior maid's workday began long before sunrise, at 5:30 in the morning. This time never changed, whether in the sweltering summer or the dark, frosty winter. They woke up in an icy attic room that the girls shared among several of them. They had absolutely no time for long preparations or personal reflection. Every minute of the morning schedule was strictly regulated and planned down to the second by the senior housekeepers. The first task after quickly getting dressed was to wash one's face with ice-cold water from a small ceramic jug. Warm water was considered an unallowable and inaccessible luxury for the lower-ranking staff in those days. Then one had to quickly tidy up one's modest uniform and put on a clean white apron. A maid's appearance had to be impeccable, even though no one saw her. Strict rules required perfectly styled hair and the absence of any adornments on the uniform dress. After that, hard physical labor began, requiring immense stamina and patience. A separate and very difficult task was preparing the windows for the coming day. Dozens of huge panes of glass had to be wiped clean of moisture and condensation that had accumulated during the cold night. The maids had to balance on tall wooden ladders, risking a fall onto the hard stone floor.
Keep going. You can do it.
Simple rags and newspaper were used to avoid leaving streaks on the transparent surface. The cleanliness of the glass was a source of particular pride for the head housekeeper, who strictly inspected every corner. The slightest carelessness meant the work had to be redone immediately without a break. After cleaning the staterooms, it was time to prepare morning tea for the senior staff. The junior maids carried trays with heavy teapots and cups down the long, dark corridors. They served those who ranked above them in the strict and complex palace hierarchy. Only after that could they themselves take a brief break for a modest morning meal. The meal consisted of plain porridge, bread, and leftover tea, hastily swallowed in the semi-basement kitchen. No more than 15 minutes of strictly regulated time was allotted for this meal. Not all the girls hired into the royal staff could keep up with this work schedule. Many quit after just a few months, unable to endure the harsh conditions and the strictest discipline. Those who stayed, however, became true professionals, capable of performing any task perfectly. For years, they saved their meager wages, unable to spend them on entertainment. The life of a junior maid consisted of an endless series of monotonous, arduous tasks that remained completely invisible to the outside world. Their labor was the foundation upon which the comfortable life of Victorian high society was built. The daily struggle to maintain cleanliness in a massive stone building was a true feat for these women. Their names have not been preserved in the historical records, but it was through their hands that the grandeur of an entire era was created. Could you wake up every day at 5 in the morning for such hard work? In the next chapter, you'll learn about the incredible difficulties the cooks faced to get hot food on the table. Organizing meals at Buckingham Palace was an incredibly complex and large-scale process. The kitchens were located in the farthest wing of the building, a considerable distance from the formal dining rooms. This architectural decision was made to completely eliminate the smell of cooking food in the living rooms.
Exactly. Log it correctly this time.
The huge vaulted halls of the kitchen block resembled the blazing workshops of a real steel mill of that era. The heat from the massive open hearths and copper stoves was simply unbearable, even during the winter months. Dozens of chefs and cooks toiled in this inferno from early morning until late at night.
And don't spill it this time. Yes, chef.
The main challenge was delivering the finished dishes to the table while they were still hot and appetizing. The distance from the stoves to the dining hall was several hundred meters through a maze of corridors. To keep the food from getting cold, special metal containers with double bottoms for hot water were devised. Servants ran with these heavy contraptions in their hands, trying not to trip on the stone steps. Any delay along the way meant that the exquisite sauce would congeal and the meat would lose its flavor. Coordinating the movements of dozens of footmen required the precision of a fine, expensive Swiss chronometer. Huge supplies of food were stored in vast cold cellars located beneath the kitchen block. There hung animal carcasses and hundreds of barrels of wine, cheeses, and fresh vegetables were stored. Special storekeepers kept strict records of every gram of spice or sugar issued to the kitchen.
Watch the steps.
Theft of food was considered a most serious crime and was punished by immediate expulsion without letters of recommendation. Food was delivered daily to the palace from the finest farms and markets throughout Britain. The logistics of supply were thought out down to the smallest detail to avoid disruptions in the royal court's food supply. During large state banquets, the pressure in the kitchens reached its highest and most critical point. The number of dishes ran into the dozens, and the serving of each was strictly regulated by protocol.
Yes, Mr. Carson.
The head chef personally oversaw the serving, inspecting the appearance of each plate before it was sent upstairs. He could reject a finished dish for the slightest deviation in color or the shape of the garnish. Servants lined up in long chains, passing silver trays from hand to hand. This conveyor belt operated non-stop for many hours until the gala dinner concluded. This ice was delivered in special carts and stored in deep sawdust pits underground. It was used to make ice cream and chill beverages during the hot summer months. Manual labor was the foundation of the culinary arts of the Victorian era in any noble household. The kitchen was a veritable state unto itself, with its own laws and strict rules. The noise, heat, and constant rush shaped the character of the people who worked under these harsh conditions. They were professionals of the highest caliber, capable of creating culinary masterpieces practically out of thin air. Their work remained behind the scenes of the glittering receptions. Yet it was precisely this work that ensured the success of any celebration. The palace lived and functioned thanks to this gastronomic heart, hidden from prying eyes. The kitchen was the hottest, noisiest, and most important place in this vast stone labyrinth. The hidden truth that everyone keeps quiet about lies in the relationships among the palace staff themselves. The world of the servants was divided by a ruthless social hierarchy, no less strict than noble titles. Senior servants, such as the butler, the housekeeper, and the head chef, wielded immense power within their domains. They dined in a separate room, where junior staff served them as if they were noble lords. Their clothing was made from higher quality materials and often mirrored the fashions of high society. Moving from the lowest caste to the highest was a dream that required decades of impeccable and submissive service. The junior staff, which included dishwashers, stokers, and junior maids, occupied the very bottom of this hierarchy. They had no say and were required to unquestioningly obey any orders from their superiors. Even making eye contact with the housekeeper without direct permission was considered insolence and was severely punished. Relationships between the different levels were emphatically formal and devoid of any friendly warmth. This management system allowed for the maintenance of perfect order within a vast collective of hundreds of different people. The fear of dismissal was the main incentive for adhering to all the unspoken rules of conduct. Relationships between servants of different genders were also strictly regulated by the palace's internal rules. The male and female halves of the staff lived in completely separate, isolated wings of the enormous building. Romantic relationships between employees were strictly forbidden and led to the immediate dismissal of both parties. It was believed that personal feelings would distract from one's direct duties and disrupt the workflow. Housekeepers closely monitored the behavior of young maids, quashing any attempts to befriend the footmen. The palace demanded complete dedication, leaving no room for forming one's own family ties. Promotion depended not only on hard work, but also on the favor of superiors. To become a senior footman, one had to spend years flawlessly polishing shoes and carrying out minor tasks for one's superiors. Any conflict with the butler put an end to an ambitious young man's future career at the palace. Letters of recommendation from senior servants carried immense weight when seeking employment in other households. Consequently, the system fostered both loyalty and hidden intrigues among the building's numerous staff. Everyone strove to curry favor and secure a more comfortable and advantageous position within this complex hierarchy. Studying this complex hierarchy helps us understand the psychology of society during that distant historical period. People accepted their inequality as a given, making no attempt to change the established order of things that had endured for centuries. The world of the servants was an exact mirror image of the world of the aristocracy, complete with its lords and common peasants. Every person knew exactly their place and their role in this grand and complex spectacle. The palace functioned smoothly precisely because of this cruel but incredibly effective system of subordination. The hierarchy was not merely a set of rules, it was the very reason for the existence of this community. This life, hidden from prying eyes, was full of its own tragedies, hopes, and small victories. People found meaning in work performed flawlessly, even if no one ever noticed it. What would it be like for you to live in a system where your every action is monitored by your superiors? In the next chapter, you'll learn what a simple desire to wash your hands turned into during the Victorian era. Supplying a huge palace with clean water was a real engineering and logistical challenge of the 19th century. The absence of the modern plumbing system with pumps that we are accustomed to made the delivery of water incredibly hard manual labor. All the water needed for drinking, cooking, and cleaning was hauled up to the upper floors by the physical strength of the servants. Deep wells in the inner courtyards and heavy metal buckets on pulleys were used for this purpose. Every day, workers traversed kilometers of stone corridors, carrying hundreds of liters of heavy liquid on their shoulders. This grueling process continued non-stop from early morning until late at night. The lower utility floors housed enormous lead tanks for settling well water before use. The water often contained impurities of sand and small debris, which had to be thoroughly removed. Cleaning these massive tanks was done by hand and was a complex and very unpleasant procedure. Servants would climb down into the tanks with brushes, removing the slimy lime deposits that had accumulated on the walls. The quality of the water directly affected the taste of the food and the preservation of expensive linens during washing. Therefore, the cleanliness of these tanks was monitored with particular, almost fanatical attention and strictness. Ordinary servants could not afford such a luxury as a proper bath in hot water. To maintain personal hygiene, they were provided with small basins and jugs of cold water in their bedrooms. Washing often came down to a quick wipe with a damp sponge before the start of a long workday. Rare bathing days were organized in damp basements, where water was heated in communal boilers. The lack of proper bathing facilities made maintaining personal cleanliness an incredibly difficult daily task. People of the Victorian era had entirely different, far harsher standards of personal hygiene and freshness. Washing the enormous amount of palace linens was yet another process that consumed thousands of liters of precious water. Laundries were located in remote service wings, hidden behind high stone walls from the formal courtyards. There was always thick steam there, and the floors were flooded with slippery, soapy water and caustic lye. Washerwomen spent days on end scrubbing heavy linen sheets on wooden groove boards, scraping the skin off their knuckles. Wringing out the wet laundry required tremendous physical strength, which not all young women possessed. Then heavy baskets of damp fabric were carried out to dry in the courtyards or special warm attics. Rainwater was considered particularly valuable for washing delicate fabrics and washing fine women's hair. It was collected from the palace's vast roofs via a complex system of gutters into underground stone cisterns. This water was significantly softer than well water and allowed for the conservation of expensive soap when washing lace. Servants carefully monitored the cleanliness of the gutters, clearing them of autumn leaves and city debris. The use of natural resources was a necessary measure to sustain the operations of the massive household. Every drop of collected water was put to use and utilized with the utmost efficiency and frugality. The emergence of the first primitive water supply systems in the late 19th century was a true technical breakthrough. The installation of pumps and the laying of lead pipes significantly eased the burden of transporting the heavy liquid. However, these systems often broke down, leaked, and required constant repair and maintenance by engineers. Today, it is hard for us to imagine that turning on a faucet was once an impossible and fantastical miracle. Studying these everyday details brings us back to the unvarnished reality of the historical past. The work of laundresses and water carriers deserves immense respect for their patience and incredible physical endurance. Their work maintained cleanliness and order in a world that often forgot these people even existed. The history of the palace's water supply is a story of overcoming difficulties to create a fragile illusion of perfection. Every jug of water was a symbol of human perseverance, triumphing over the inconvenience of the building's old architecture. The appearance of Buckingham Palace staff served as the calling card of the entire royal household before distinguished guests. The uniform had nothing to do with comfort or practicality. Its main purpose was to emphasize status. The footmen wore tight-fitting doublets made of stiff cloth, lavishly decorated with gold embroidery and heavy metal buttons. These doublets restricted movement, preventing them from freely raising their arms or bending down to pick up an object that had fallen to the floor. The thick fabric did not allow air to pass through, causing people to sweat constantly in the hotly heated ceremonial halls. Aesthetics were always prioritized over the physical comfort of the person performing this arduous and responsible work. Under the camisole, footmen were required to wear snow-white shirts with tight, stiffly starched high collars. This collar literally dug into the neck, forcing the head to be held unnaturally straight and tense. Perfect posture was not so much the result of good manners as it was a consequence of the rigid construction of the uniform. White gloves were a mandatory accessory when serving food and drinks at the royal dining table. They would instantly get soiled on the silver trays and required constant replacement with clean ones several times a day. Washing and maintaining the whiteness of these gloves placed a heavy burden on the workers themselves. Headwear was also a mandatory part of women's uniforms while in the staterooms. These were intricate lace bonnets secured to the hair with dozens of small metal pins. The bonnet was not allowed to slip to one side even during the most vigorous cleaning of tall bookcases. The hair beneath it was always combed smooth, concealing any individuality or natural beauty of the young woman. These strict standards turned people into a faceless gray mass, serving merely as a living backdrop for luxury. Individuality within the palace walls was regarded as a gross violation of discipline and grounds for a fine. Maintaining this complex uniform was the sole responsibility of the servants themselves during their rare free hours. Stains from sauces or soot on the footmen's liveries had to be washed out by hand with cold water and soap. The gold embroidery faded over time and had to be carefully cleaned with a special powder using soft brushes. Buttons were polished to a shine using pieces of old leather and chalk made from ground chalk. This painstaking work took away precious minutes of sleep, which the servants were already sorely lacking. An untidy appearance could result in immediate dismissal without any lengthy proceedings. During the winter months, the problem of keeping uniforms clean was particularly acute due to the abundance of fireplace soot. Black dust settled on the snow-white collars and caps, forcing them to be changed twice a day. Servants had to spend a significant portion of their meager wages on purchasing extra soap and starch. The palace did not cover the costs of maintaining the appearance of its lower-ranking technical and service staff. Thus, working in a beautiful uniform paradoxically made poor people even poorer and more dependent. A luxurious appearance demanded constant financial and physical sacrifices from those who wore it. The uniform was also a tool of strict social control over all the workers in the vast building. By the color of the livery or the shape of the cap, one could unerringly determine a person's status and duties. This prevented any unauthorized movement of servants into those wings of the palace where they were not supposed to be. A person in a coarse work apron could not pass unnoticed through the corridor reserved for senior footmen. Today, antique liveries are displayed in museums as exquisite examples of the tailoring art of past centuries. Visitors marvel at the delicacy of the embroidery and the quality of the cloth, forgetting the people who wore these garments. The history of the uniform is a history of how beauty and prestige demanded the complete subjugation of human nature. Behind every gold braid lies the pain of weary feet and the blood-stained hands of ordinary people. Examining these details helps us take a fuller and more honest look at the romanticized image of the Victorian era. The glittering facade concealed the harsh truth of daily, exhausting labor. Keeping a building of such incredible scale clean was a Sisyphean task for dozens of maids and cleaners. Buckingham Palace was overflowing with heavy carved furniture, intricate stucco moldings, and enormous crystal chandeliers. Every curl on an armchair and every pendant on a chandelier was a perfect magnet for city dust. Open windows let in not only fresh air, but also soot from 19th century London factory chimneys. Settling on surfaces, this sticky mixture turned into stubborn grime that was extremely difficult to remove. Combating this invisible threat required daily methodical efforts from the entire household staff. Polishing the vast surfaces of precious woods was a true art, requiring patience and physical strength. Servants used homemade polishes made from beeswax and turpentine to give the furniture a deep shine. The wax was applied in a thick layer and then rubbed for hours on end with soft woolen cloths until it reached a mirror-like finish. The movements had to be firm and rhythmic so that the wax would penetrate every pore of the antique wood. The workers' hands buzzed with tension after polishing the endless long tables in the grand banquet hall. The reflection of the crystal chandeliers in the polished table was the main indicator of the quality of the hard work performed. The crystal chandeliers themselves, consisting of thousands of tiny faceted pieces, required jeweler's precision when cleaning. Every few months, the chandeliers were slowly lowered from the ceiling using special hidden pulley mechanisms. Each glass pendant was carefully wiped with a cloth dampened in a weak solution of alcohol and clean water. Servants were forbidden to use stiff brushes so as not to scratch the surface of the expensive clear crystal. This process could take several days of continuous work by an entire team of specially trained, experienced people. The dazzling radiance of the halls during balls was made possible precisely by this painstaking and unnoticed work of the maids. Fireplace soot was the greatest enemy of cleanliness in any Victorian home during that austere historical period. Tiny black particles settled on the light-colored wallpaper, paintings, and faces of the marble statues in the hallways. To remove soot from the wallpaper, they used special loaves of fresh, soft bread, which acted as an eraser. Maids carefully rolled the breadcrumb along the wall, collecting the black, sticky dust film onto it. This method was long and tedious, but it allowed them to avoid using water, which was destructive to paper. Marble was washed with a weak lye solution, taking care not to damage the polish of the antique and expensive sculptural compositions. Tidying up the vast library was a task that required particular care and incredible patience on the part of the staff. Thousands of antique books in leather bindings required regular protection from dust and small pests. Each book had to be carefully removed from the shelf, wiped with a dry cloth, and aired out. The leather spines were regularly treated with a special oily compound to prevent them from drying out and cracking in the heat. This work was carried out in complete silence, so as not to disturb those who might be in neighboring rooms. Cleaning the library alone could take several weeks of monotonous and meticulous labor. Dust penetrated everywhere, despite all the tricks and round-the-clock efforts of the palace's vast staff. The battle against it resembled military operations, where the enemy always found new ways to launch a silent offensive. The absence of vacuum cleaners turned this process into an endless cycle of cleaning that never led to a final victory. No sooner had they finished cleaning the grand staircase than they had to start all over again, as the dust settled once more. This endlessness turned the maids' work into a routine devoid of any visible end result or joy. They were hostages to a vast, dusty machine that demanded constant care and attention. The high standards of cleanliness in the Victorian era were dictated not only by aesthetics, but also by a fear of the filth of big cities. The palace was meant to be an island of impeccable freshness amid the smoky and noisy industrial London. This contrast between the dirty street and the gleaming hall underscored the incredible status of royal power. But dozens of people paid for this illusion of cleanliness with their health, breathing in chemicals and flying dust. Their labor was invisible but critically important for maintaining the majestic image of the British Empire. Without their daily battle against dirt, the luxurious interiors would quickly have lost their original luster. Today, the cleaning process has been greatly simplified thanks to the advent of powerful machinery and modern cleaning products. But the grandeur of these historic palaces still preserves the memory of the hands that scrubbed these floors centuries ago. Understanding the scale of this manual labor compels us to treat the history of everyday life with greater respect. The beauty of Victorian interiors is not only the achievement of architects, but also a monument to human patience. Every gleaming detail in these vast rooms was paid for by long hours of grueling physical labor. And this historical truth must not be forgotten behind the facades of modern tourist postcards. The hardest trial for the servants of Buckingham Palace was not the physical labor, but the complete lack of personal freedom. By entering service, a person effectively gave up their own life for the comfort of their noble masters. The workday lasted from dawn until late at night, leaving no time for hobbies or meeting with friends. Days off were extremely rare and were granted no more than once in a long and difficult month. Even during this brief period of rest, a servant was required to return to the palace before nightfall. Violating curfew was punished with severe fines and could result in immediate dismissal and disgrace. The living conditions of the lower-ranking staff were radically different from the luxury of the grand halls and spacious royal bedrooms. Servants huddled in tiny, poorly heated rooms under the very roof or in damp basements. A single such cubbyhole often held several narrow bunks, leaving no room for even modest personal belongings. The lack of even basic personal space created constant psychological tension among people who were already exhausted from the day's work. Arguments and conflicts over trivial household matters were a common occurrence in these cramped and gloomy quarters. However, it was forbidden to air one's grievances outside the home, and all grievances had to be buried deep within. Contact with the outside world was strictly limited for the servants and controlled by the palace's senior housekeepers. Letters from family members were often inspected to prevent information about the royal family's life from leaking to the newspapers. Receiving guests in their rooms was strictly prohibited by the internal regulations of the vast building. Social interaction was limited solely to fellow workers, forming a closed and highly specific community. People lived for years in this artificial isolation, gradually losing touch with their former friends and relatives. The palace became their only world, replacing the rest of the vast universe. The wages of junior staff were extremely meager and barely covered the cost of maintaining their uniforms. People saved most of their earnings for old age, as there were no state pensions at the time. It was incredibly difficult to save a significant amount, given the constant system of harsh palace fines for the slightest infractions. The fear of being left without means of support in old age forced people to endure any hardship and humiliation in service. This made them completely dependent on the whims of their employers and the senior managers of the palace staff. Financial bondage was yet another unbreakable chain holding a person within these cold stone walls. Illness was the greatest fear for any worker in the harsh and ruthless Victorian era. If a servant fell ill and could not perform their duties, they were often dismissed without any severance pay. Sick leave did not exist, and the loss of one's ability to work meant the immediate loss of a roof over one's head. Therefore, people often hid their ailments, continuing to work despite high fevers or severe physical pain. Access to quality medical care was virtually impossible for the poor due to the high cost of doctors' services. Health was these people's only asset, and they mercilessly squandered it on polishing other people's floors. Entertainment during their rare hours of rest was the simplest and most accessible for the poor working class of that time. Servants would gather in the kitchen in the evenings to play cards, listen to singing, or discuss the latest gossip. Reading cheap pulp novels by the light of dim candles was one of the few ways to escape reality. Sometimes the older servants organized modest tea parties or dances in the basement during major national holidays. These rare moments of joy helped people keep from going mad from the endless monotony of their hard lives. They knew how to appreciate the tiny glimmers of happiness in the endless succession of gloomy and arduous workdays. The elderly servants, who had devoted their entire lives to the palace, presented a sad and tragic sight. Their health had been irrevocably ruined by hard labor, the cold and constant sleep deprivation in their younger years. Many suffered from severe joint diseases, acquired while endlessly scrubbing stone floors with icy water. If they were lucky, the monarch would grant them a modest pension, allowing them to rent a small room on the outskirts of industrial London. Otherwise, they ended their days in workhouses, which was considered the ultimate disgrace. The fate of these devoted workers serves as a stark reminder of the cruelty of the social system of the past century. Studying the daily lives of Victorian servants completely shatters the glossy image of a beautiful historical fairy tale from the 19th century. Lavish balls and receptions were only possible thanks to the total enslavement of hundreds of ordinary people. Their invisible labor was the foundation upon which the grandeur of the entire vast and powerful British Empire rested. Understanding this cost forces us to view antique furniture and old gilded portraits in a completely different light. Behind every luxury item lies the story of a person deprived of their freedom for the sake of its endless polishing and cleaning. This is a harsh but necessary lesson from history that teaches us to value the rights of the modern free person. Today, Buckingham Palace operates quite differently, adhering to all the standards of modern European labor law. Employees are entitled to a standard workday, days off, and fair compensation for their professional labor. However, the shadows of the past still linger in the narrow, hidden corridors of this ancient and majestic building. They remind us of an era when the comfort of some was bought at the cost of the complete isolation and suffering of others. The memory of these silent laborers is an important part of the true history of Britain's most famous residents. Without their silent service, the palace walls would never have retained their cold and haughty historical splendor. As we can see, Real life at Buckingham Palace during the Victorian era was far from a glittering fairy tale. Behind the magnificent facades lay a harsh world of hard labor, strict rules, and constant cold. This historical reality allows us to gain a deeper understanding of the price of comfort and status in the 19th century. Exploring these details strips away the romantic veil, revealing real life without the usual TV embellishments. What do you think of these harsh realities, and what topics would you like to see in our next videos? Be sure to share your suggestions in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any new videos.